It is a brand new edition of Flyers Daily, a Monday edition. Happy April Fool's Day, everybody. I don't know if you say Happy April Fool's Day, but we just did. Flyers Daily presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Lots of topics to discuss this week, and I think a pretty diverse variety of topics and some really monumental topics as well. Joining us, as always, on Mondays from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com, it is Bill Meltzer. Bill, it sure has been a week from a couple of struggles coming out of the gauntlet against two teams you would deem as inferior and two missed opportunities, but not a lot of damage done as a result, luckily for them, to not one but two Russians coming over. Well, one a Russian and one Belarusian, as Alexei Kolosov now joins Ivan Fedotov here in North America, one at Lehigh, one in Philadelphia. Let's start with Fedotov, Bill, because I really thought this ship had sailed and that this just wasn't going to happen. We know about all the geopolitical issues, the arrest and being sent to the Arctic Circle and then signing the 2-year contract in the KHL. And then all of a sudden we see a tweet that year 2 of that contract has been terminated. Yeah. And feels like moments later, there's a press conference called and we're sitting there across from Ivan Fedotov in the Flyers press room at the Trading Center. What a whirlwind.
That was wild. Yeah. We get
it was weird to see him, right, in person.
it was crazy. He was here once before as a teenager. One goalie of many. Most of the attention. I mean, it was hard not to pay him some attention, being as tall as he is, right? Yeah. But most of the attention was on Felix Sandstrom because Felix had just been drafted too, and it's kind of funny, ironic in a way that now he's the guy who kind of displaced Felix on the roster all these many years later. It just goes to show you can never give up on goalies, because it wasn't like he was a prodigy in Russia. It took time for him to develop over there. He didn't really become a regular in the KHL until he was 23, 24 years old. So and then he had his takeoff point, at the start of the 2020s. So it's funny how all that worked out. He's coming off of a solid year. Took him a little bit of time after missing all of last season to kind of get his game back, which is to be expected. Honestly, he was so far on the back burner because it looked like he was never coming. I was as shocked as everybody else when all of a sudden, well, here he is. He's coming. He's here. So
he almost became a mythical figure.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the story. Stephen King can't write stories like that. It's unbelievable, the story. And then, it becomes this, it was all over all kinds of sport websites, not just hockey websites. And and then you couple that with the fact that when you meet him in person for the first time, you're like, holy cow. Like that picture, Bill, that the Flyers put out of him at practice with the net behind him and he's kind of standing up straight like this. It looks like it's photoshopped and the net behind him is a little kiddie net that you get your 4-year-old.
It really does. It looks like they stuck him in a lacrosse net or something, right? He's just towering over the net. Or then you'll see him. He's down on his knees, and and
head above the crossbar.
Yeah, he's still above the crossbar. It's pretty wild, but that's it's the case. It's the real thing.
It's amazing. So. I talked to Danny and I said, are you worried? One of the adjustments he's got to get used to here is traffic. He goes, well, when you're that big, you can look over traffic. I said, yeah, from his knees. Yeah. It's insane how big he is. Bill, I was pretty firmly, I saw some media people and some other people, tweeting, get him in there Saturday. As you know, I was fully against that for a lot of reasons, just getting here, having to adjust, learning his teammates and, the calls that a goalie needs to make, the verbal communication and nonverbal, knowing of where guys are going to be on a rim or whatever it might be, down to the equipment. I mentioned it all with Kevin Woodley on Friday's or Saturday's episode. But now, given the situation that this team is in, they could use a shot of adrenaline in the arm. And I think that Ivan Fedotov could be the shot of adrenaline they need. I say play him tonight.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting decision Kim Dillabaugh will probably have the heaviest hand in making that decision. John Tortorella will, I think, go with whatever Kim Dillabaugh recommends. It's it's pretty unprecedented. Even when a goalie has come right over from Europe, and the history of that is kind of mixed. Some guys are able to do it, some guys haven't been able to do it. You can look at some examples in Flyers history. Roman Cechmanek came over at 29, and he was a Vezina finalist right off the bat. Sergei Bobrovsky was very young still in his early 20s. He came over and stepped right in, right? In 2011, 2010, 2011. So it sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Nico Hovinen, who was almost as tall as Fedotov, maybe an inch or two shorter, but another huge goalie. He'd, I think, originally been a second round pick from Minnesota. The Flyers got him, and there was talk that he's going to come in and compete for an NHL job right away, and he flopped. He came into camp and struggled so much they sent him to the ECHL, and obviously never to really be
heard from again,
really be seen again in the organization. So it's a mixed history, but nobody's ever tried to do it. He hasn't even had a real practice. There was one optional practice with the with the scratches the other day. Then there was a game day, an off day, and there'll be a morning skate today, Monday. That's not a lot of prep time for him either. But on the flip side, the Island, all the Islanders are going to know is he's huge. There's no book on him, so who knows, right? It's pretty unprecedented territory. To have a guy come in this late and step right into the net. So
in a pressure-packed playoff push to boot.
It really is, particularly considering all those things too. But it also comes down to this, that we saw what happened late last season with Sam Ersson with the Phantoms, not the NHL level.
Yeah,
but he was gassed late in the season, and he was giving up goals. He was not giving up the rest, any time before that this season. He kind of has that look again late in the season, getting most games. In some games he's been pulled early. That's not a good thing. But he looks a little a little fatigued down the stretch. So I think you have to weigh that factor too. That March was an exceptionally busy month. He started the vast majority of the games, and has ever since the whole Carter Hart situation went on. That you mixed in the backup a few times, but it's really been quite a while here where it's been Ersson fairly exclusively. So you do have to think about maybe mentally he needs a game off too. I'm glad I'm not the one who has to make that decision, but it's a fascinating decision to make, and it'll be it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, everybody will say, "Well, what do you have to lose?" And I say 2 points.
Yeah,
that's exactly
critical points. Yeah,
critical points. But I agree with you, and the reason why I push in the direction of starting Fedotov is because Sam does have that look right now. The whole team has that look right now. You look at Sanheim and York. I know John Tortorella pointed those two out in particular post game. Not like he was mad at him, because he said it. Those guys are going to get a ton because of all the injuries and the trade of Walker. And there's been games where Cam York's played over 28 minutes.
Yeah,
against the opposition's top lines. He's killing penalties. He's playing power play. It is a heavy workload in a month where they had 15 games in 30 days. And everybody goes, well, everybody plays. That's a stretch. That's a little different. That's not everybody has a stretch like that. They did. And they didn't fare particularly well in it. Yeah. So I think the other thing that's interesting about Fedotov and Kolosov to some extent, Bill, well, they couldn't be polar opposites, by the way, but we'll talk about that in a second, is that when this all kind of started this year, we didn't know we needed them. Flyer fans didn't know we had this strengthening goal with Hart and with Sam Ersson, and things were going well. That was one of the biggest strengths of the team. When everybody was screaming, trade Hart for a haul, make Sam the number one. Why would you trade a strength, And now all of a sudden, when you do need them, I hope it's not too late, that you got him, but that's how things played out from a timeline perspective. But Kolosov comes over as well. Now, Fedotov is 6'7", 214 pounds. Kolosov rather short for a goalie by NHL standards. He's listed at 6 foot. So they're kind of opposite, very opposite in the way they play as well. But this is now two Russians, Bill, that Danny Briere's gone and pulled out of country, if you will, in a very difficult time. I said he's like a clandestine CIA officer. The Briere extraction method has worked again, where these things get really tangled. They're like
Yeah.
they're like yarn you're trying to untangle, and it gets very difficult. But he doesn't. He seems to find a way to untangle it rather quietly as well.
No, for sure. And that's, if you're going to do these kind of, it has to be done quietly.
Yeah.
Particularly where KHL situations are involved. It's very delicate and could fall apart. Snap the fingers. Even with Kolosov. I mean, with Kolosov this season, he signed his entry level deal last offseason. The Flyers loaned him back to Dynamo Minsk for the year with an understanding that he would, because he's old enough now where the contract wouldn't slide back to the KHL for this year. So you had to burn the first year of his entry level deal.
Yep.
You're basically paying the freight for him to play in Russia one more year with an understanding that, okay, we'll have regular contact with him, that, as Brady Robinson notices things, he'll have access to speak with them. And then an understanding that when the year is over, he'll be over here, whether it would have been next season or late this season, we'll have access to him. So you're taking a little bit of a leap of faith too.
Yeah.
That you were upholding their end, they'll uphold theirs. And they did. When Dynamo was eliminated in the playoffs, they said thank you for a job really well done.
Yeah.
He actually beat out a goalie that played a little bit in the NHL even a year ago. So it wasn't like he had no competition for playing time, but he won the number one job this year. Whereas we said Fedotov was no prodigy, Kolosov's been a little bit of a prodigy in the KHL, but at 19 he was already playing in the KHL.
Yeah.
So as you said, study and contrast, they could not be more opposite in style. But he's obviously a good deal younger than Fedotov is. How close he is to being NHL ready, I think we'll see over the rest of this year in camp and so forth. But now you're potentially, some of that depth in the system that we've talked about a little bit before, that goaltending could in the long term be a strength, but in the short term, with the whole Carter Hart situation, became a big question mark.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's becoming a strength again in short order. So, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, they have Zavragin, Yegor Zavragin, that's over there playing in the MHL, played in the junior league over there. And then you look at a guy like Carson Bjarnason. I mean, my hit rate on goaltenders, I go, if you hit on 1 out of every 4, 1 out of every 5, that's good. And you have some really nice prospects there for the long haul at that position, not just prospects, but pretty well-developed ones at this point as well. But let me ask you this, because I haven't heard this really brought up yet, but this willingness to take that leap of faith with a team in the Continental Hockey League, with the stick-to-itiveness with which this Fedotov thing happened, and again, very quietly, does that portend anything for Matvei Michkov? Because there's obviously some respect both ways here. And when that respect happens with one organization in the KHL and then two, and even though they initially denied the IIHF ruling and all of that, but does this portend a little better for Matvei Michkov maybe to get here sooner than the 3 years, or certainly with less entanglement?
We'll see how all that goes.
Because of Rottenberg?
Yeah, I mean, Roman Rottenberg is a whole different cat than pretty much anybody else. You're dealing with even Siska, even the old Red Army team. None of them have the guy who's the owner who made himself the GM, who made himself the head coach, who, it's just different. It's just different. So, but everything is, everything has a solution to it. He is, even though he clearly is already a good KHL player, he hasn't even really been able to get into the Scott lineup these past 2 years. So, I have a hard time predicting what the actual timetable is. All I can say is it was pretty complicated. Kolosov, I wouldn't say it's straightforward. And again, nothing is truly straightforward, but a lot more straightforward than the other two situations.
Yeah.
And Fedotov being a different situation than Michkov. But it gives me faith that if there is a solution to be had to maybe bring him over sooner, the Flyers are the people that can do that.
Yeah. And aren't afraid to take on that. I mean, Danny's fearless. I just get this sense he's fearless from bringing Michkov over here before the draft and in a clandestine way, and just to be willing to go out there and do some really bold things. It's about time this organization grew some. Well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But got back to that, right? Like, this is a family show, so I don't want to say it, but like, go out there and be bold and be aggressive. And to get the payoff, I think, is incredible. So we'll see where that goes. Bill, the last two games, the Montreal game 4-1, I hated the first period of that game. I thought the second two periods they played well. I thought Caden Primo played well in that game.
Yeah.
And I kind of understood it. I go, okay, I understand it. This is the human nature element of coming out of a gauntlet and maybe not being at the same, and a lot of games in a lot of days. And then Saturday, even though you don't get any points against Montreal, and you know how tight it is, they really, I thought, played maybe their worst game of the season. You can go back to that San Jose game. They lost 2-1 early on November 7th. I thought they played decent in that game. They lost 2-1. But when you look at the game against Chicago, I thought that they just stunk out loud.
They really, really did. Well, first of all, the first period was absolutely brutal.
Hideous.
And they deserved to be losing 2-0. It even could have been maybe even worse than that. But I thought that, we'll start with the Montreal game. And you go back in there and watch the first shift of that game. It's a great first shift of that game.
Yeah.
Actually, they were hemmed in. Flyers created a chance or two right off the bat. Okay, this is the start we want. You carry that over, and then maybe a couple shifts after they had their first power play. And the first power play went nowhere. And, it torpedoed any momentum they had, and they didn't get it back till they're losing 2-0, and it's fairly late in the second period. And then they made the big push you would expect in the third period. Had a couple of goals disallowed, correctly so, but I'll add to that the second one, the offside goal, it was offside. But I hate offside challenges where we're looking at freeze frames. Is the skate touching the blue lines and hovering over the blue line, particularly when the goal being as it developed after had nothing to do with being very slightly offside. Yeah. That was always, till recent rules, that was a goal. If it was called onside the line, it was a goal. I know that's not the rules. Under the rules, it was offside. It's not a goal. But at any rate, you came up short in it. But you at least made that push until they get a couple empty net goals at the end, and so the final score looks a little worse than it was. It was really, you're really right there for most of the game.
Yeah.
And then you go to the Chicago game. Like I said, the first period was absolutely awful. The second period, and you could take it back to the final minute of the first, because Scott Laughton drops the gloves, which was all about trying to get some emotion stirred up in his own team. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a fight for any other reason than to try to inject something in his own team. And then you come out, bang, first shift, Tyson Foerster scores from distance, 2-1. You're right there, right? Next shift, connecting hits the post.
Yeah.
And everything is going the Flyers' way once again until you get a power play.
Yeah.
Nothing happened on the power play. Nothing happened on a power play after that.
They get a power play and then they score.
And then Chicago gets their first power and they score. Yeah. The penalty kill is a real concern right now. It's been now 12 games So there's always going to be hiccups. There's always going to be a game here and there. I mean, the Flyers their season numbers still look so strong that it masks it a little bit. But the Flyers over the last 12 games are about 62%. That's not going to get it done,
Not even close.
Especially when your own power play is really struggling. More than it's clicking. The Flyers were at over 86% when this downslide began. Now they're at about 83%. So for the numbers for the season still look good. This needs to be fixed immediately. Right now, if this continues, special teams, if nothing else, might cost them this playoff spot unless they figure this out now.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. And then finally, third period against Chicago, you didn't have that push. There was really no juice there.
Yeah, it looked like dead legs.
Yeah.
They look like they're tired physically, mentally, and
then,
maybe most importantly, emotionally.
Yeah.
It's been, riding this crazy wave. But look, nothing you can do about it. You got to get after it. Let me ask you this, Bill, because coincidentally, you mentioned that 12 games for the Flyers. In the last 12 games, Chicago actually was a better team than the Flyers in those 12 games. They had only, going into the Flyer game, had only scored one less goal than they gave up. And you look at their numbers before that in the previous 26 games, they had 4 wins, and they were minus 33 goal differential in those. But you look at those 12 wins, and I think there's a lot of things contributing to that 12 games. One is some of the things that were strengths for this team, goaltending. When the goaltending isn't the strength, what does it affect? It affects penalty kill. When Sean Couturier on February, I think it was February 7th, around there, all of a sudden his minutes drop from the 20s early in the season to the 18s to 16 for a couple, then below 15. Now we're in 11, and we've been there for a while. I think all of those things, they're not all, you can't point to one and say that's the reason, but it's the cumulative effect of all of those things that were strengths that are now not strengths. And now it's a dogfight. And now the playoffs may slip through your fingers, even though you've put yourself in this position.
Yeah, for sure. And what's the the flip side of some of that is you're overstressing some other players.
Yeah.
In a series of games where the gauntlet is over, but it wasn't in a way where you had 7 straight games where it was almost like a big playoff series where every shift is elevated, where you have to be on all because the quality of opposition they were playing. Those were the top contenders in the conference. If you let the foot off the gas for a shift for a minute, right? You're all of a sudden all the momentum changes. It was like that, a hint of what could happen was back in February, that game in Toronto where
second period,
the first 30 minutes of the game, they're in total control. Next thing you know, Austin Matthews says a natural hat trick and you're losing.
Because you had a bad change.
Yeah. And it started with the bad icing and then a bad line change.
Yep.
And then one's in your net, and now the momentum train is rolling, straight downhill on you. Yeah. So that's those were the kind of opposition they were playing. And
the 5-2 game against Washington, same thing, Bill. Draw play. Ovechkin gets the goal, and they end up winning the game 5-2.
Yeah, exactly. And that was another game where it was really going their way for a significant amount of time. As you said, you're up 2-0 at one point in that game. So you play that within the intensity for that prolonged period of time, and often with a shortened bench, and with players who are getting 25, 26, 28 minutes for Cam York. Travis Sanheim playing through something, and so was York too. But Sanheim enough to where he had to take maintenance days, where he would, they have a morning skate. He wouldn't skate in the morning. He'd play in the game. They'd have a practice day. He would take that day out just to be ready to play in the game.
It's been 3-4 weeks now. I don't even know that he's taken a morning skate or a practice day.
Yeah. So,
I love that he's battling through, though, to be honest.
Oh, no, for sure. And it's what it takes. You have to do that.
Yeah.
And up front.
Me a lot.
As good as like the Ryan Poehling line has been in the second half of the season, especially since the All-Star break, Ryan Poehling has no history of playing 18, 20 minutes a night.
No.
And he was one of the guys that I thought looked pretty fatigued. Last game against Chicago, he just like looked like he was because you know what a good skater ordinarily is. He looked like he was skating in sand.
Yeah.
And just seems one of those guys look like he's digging for something, and there was just nothing there.
Yeah.
So with Couturier playing so many less minutes, those minutes have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And so and Paling's been one of the main places they've gone to. So have one day off. I mean, everybody is to a degree in that same boat, but the Flyers have to really, if they can find a way to the 2 points, and they need the 2 points, even if And here's the thing too. Now they can't even worry about what Washington is doing. You just have to take care of your own business.
Yeah.
You can't worry about Washington. You can't worry about Detroit. You need to wins.
Yeah.
So get a win here. You have a few days off. Your first couple off days in a while. I know John Tortorella was saying that he'd love to have practices. He really can't right now.
Yeah. It's the juice worth the squeeze. You can't waste the energy.
Exactly. They'll be able to get one in.
Yeah.
But I don't think, even though it's on the schedule, I don't think ultimately they'll have two.
No, I think they'll come in and do a meeting and then send them home.
Yeah, and I think that's good where it's going to end up going.
Yeah.
Any little bit of practice you can get, keep it short, keep it high tempo, and then get off the ice.
Yep.
This isn't the time for dual sheets. Do the first half here, second half. You're not going to do any battle drills. You're not going to waste any energy at this point.
Yeah.
You're going to conserve as much as you can. Get the 2 points. Couple days off. You got to get ready for a back-to-back after that.
Yeah.
And just that's where we're at right now. Simple as that.
It is as simple as that. You cannot worry about the scoreboard. You have to control what you can control, and that's the 2 points you have an opportunity to get. So we'll see where it all goes. I think Konechny's dealing with something too. Yeah. I mean, he looks in discomfort at points in games.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's some kind of core injury that he's dealing with or something, but there looks to be a little less burst at times.
Yeah,
he's grinding through it. A lot of guys are grinding through it, and that's what hockey players do. You don't get bonus points for grinding through it because a lot of hockey players do it. So, but I think he's definitely dealing with something as well. Bill, last thing, I still think I know a lot of people. They see the result of those last two games. They go, team doesn't deserve to make the playoffs, and I say, BS. You deserve to make the playoffs if you make the playoffs after 82 games.
Yeah.
This whole they don't deserve it or they're going to back in. I don't care. There's still a ton to gain by this team making the playoffs. And I know the dirt and shovel brigade, they're always out there lurking, like hanging outside my door. Like, and as soon as like a bad goal goes in, they start knocking, right? This dirt and shovel brigade. And they're ready to get the backhoe out and fill in the gravesite. But this team's responded in these situations, and a couple days off after the game tonight, and they could be ready to push down this stretch run. And maybe it comes down to that final game on the 16th against Washington, where they're not in a back-to-back and Washington is. I don't know, but it'll be dramatic when to that.
No, absolutely. And I think that these are games sometimes where your veterans really do have to be the guys who lead the way. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, and I agree with you. Konechny, really ever since he's been back, although he has scored some goals, but he's definitely battling through something. He does not look like the way he looked before the injury. He missed 6 games and he's come back, and it's been pretty inconsistent. I think a big part of it is that you try to stay out of shifts where easier said than done sometimes, but easier to just stay out of shifts where you're just gassed and have to get back to the bench. You really try to, I know it's a cliche, right? But you make simple plays. When you have an opportunity to get the puck out of your zone, you do that. The Flyers are a team that generates a lot of its offense in transitions. They haven't really, they've had a few of them, and they've actually had a couple breakaway opportunities, which might have been momentum shifters. You have to execute. When you have those chances, you have to bear down and execute on them. And the other part too is fighting that mental and emotional fatigue. Yeah. Look at there was a play in the Chicago game. Chicago was back up by 2 at that point. but you score. And Chicago's a team that doesn't know how to close games out. You look at their record; they're a team that does not know how to win. That play with Igor Zamula, with a turnover he had in the neutral zone, which was a pure panic play.
Yeah,
there's a pure panic play. You make panic plays, you dig your own grave, because those will bite you 9 times out of 10. I really think that they have to keep their heads about them. Just keep going forward. I mean, it's a million cliches, but they're cliches because they're true.
Yeah.
The Flyers have to play that kind of a game. Simple, direct, not being their own worst enemies, and find their way and get the 2 points against the Islanders, and I think it's a whole different outlook for the rest of the week too.
Totally agree, with the 3 days off and then the back-to-back coming up this weekend. Got Buffalo on Friday, Columbus on Saturday. Then it'll be off to Montreal a week from tomorrow, and the Rangers a week from Thursday, and then they'll be home for the final 2 against New Jersey on the Saturday, the 13th, and then the final game of the regular season, Washington on the 16th. All right, we'll wrap it up there, Bill. Great stuff as always. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. It is going to be a huge week for the Flyers. Not a lot of games this week, but still some pretty monumental things. And we'll see if Ivan Fedotov gets the nod tonight. We'll discuss all that and more tomorrow. So join us then on a brand new episode of Flyers Daily.